This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Matt Gupta.
Chapter 16. Seaward. With the rise of the sun, the company left the castle for Seaward. Julius had listened to Felthor's plan, but he hadn't taken to it with any enthusiasm. The wounded had been brought to the castle just as Julius promised, and many of them would see the next summer. Julius's men were much more fortunate. All but the singular dead knight had been unharmed. Julius was silent, leading the small host. Falthor's words had left him unsettled and were haunting him. "Men will die at your words," he had shouted in the hall to the former consul. "The kingdom will kill its own. It is disgusting, and I will have no part of it." He had stormed out of the hall to his knights and had ridden out again. He had captured the ships and had brought them to the shore with the few men of Seaward who had experience with ships. It wasn't much of a task, as the ships were visible on the water, even from the castle. When he returned, his mood had settled, and he asked Felthor for more details. He had regretted it the moment he did, and no amount of details had changed his mind. He had vowed not to betray the plot to Ignatius due to his family bond, and Felthor had the decency to not plague him with fresh talk, but he had hoped that Alistair would have better appreciation for the plan. Finally, they arrived in the corridor to the great city. Seaward existed on a massive cliff that hung precariously over the sea and was linked to the mainland only by a single bridge of rock. The men of Seaward didn't have much when they had settled here, but the first prince had the water and rock, and he knew how to use it. He had founded his city on an elevated island and had made only a single causeway into the city. The mountainous mass that had blocked their passage days before was now a welcome shield. It meant that any forces attacking by land would only be able to access the city from the north or south approaches. The city was designed to be impenetrable from sea. The only way that an enemy could attack the city would be to anchor their ships against the cliffs and set up siege towers and ladders to begin the long climb, although the ships below would be broken against the sharp rocks at the base of the island. The harbour was built as an architectural marvel, being massive, efficient for merchant use, and inaccessible to invaders. The inner harbour was a brilliant circular construction that ferried ships around to unload their wares and continue back out again. The outer harbour was a massive, long and straight body of walled water that could easily hold 200 vessels, the only inner access being the tiny opening scarcely wide enough for a single ship to pass through. That, along with the protection of coastal fortresses like Ferris, made the city a beacon of hope to all who feared the sea. The corridor was blocked to them by the same styled hoplite soldiers that Julius had, armed with spear and shield, with a short sword on their hip and a kopis blade on the small of their backs. They stood as a tower of bronze and sky blue cloth. When they identified themselves, they pushed all others wanting access to the city aside and welcomed them with all the revelry they could muster. The city knew Julius immediately and didn't question the rest of them, even Tiberius, who was bandaged and devoid of regalia. The healers had had to cut him out of his bent armour, as it was holding his ribs in place. He rode well, however, Richard keeping a cautious step behind him, ready to catch him if he fell from his mount. They walked their horses along the corridor. It was filled with countless people, both soldiers and civilians. The crowd parted down the middle to let them through, and the people all bowed to Julius as if he was their prince. All of their attention was on Julius, all but ignoring his followers. They maintained their bow until the end of the procession passed. Felthor smiled. "They greet you like you are the prince yourself," he said to Julius. "I am a prince of a prince of a prince," Julius shrugged. "It is as my grandfather commanded. I suppose I am to be one eventually, but not now." "Indeed," Felthor smiled. "You are your father's son, Julius. You will make a fine Archon." "You're too kind," Julius grimaced. "I wonder if I will have a principality to rule over when it will be mine." "You do not want to be ruler?" "No," Julius shook his head once. "I feel I was made to be the heir. But I do not want to be prince. I do better leading from the front, protecting my family's realm from the saddle of my horse and the clash of my steel. My father had a gift for politics and the games of nobility that I will never have." "Or your sister," Felthor smiled. "Or my sister," Julius agreed. They both looked at each other and laughed. They finally crossed the bridge and the gates opened to them. Gilorn was in awe of the city. In many ways, it was more beautiful than the capital. The streets were alive with movement, filled with the voices of men trading, calling out prices or attempting to seduce passing women. Like the capital, the buildings were made of white marble, with marble pillars in front of the doorways and walls, but each marble slab was adorned with color. At the top of each building were two flags, the black and white flag of House Steward and the blue and silver owl of Sea Ward. The city had a number of hills throughout. Each hill had a building of significance on it, ranging from temples and barracks to private homes. In the middle of the city was a huge skyscraper, a building of pure blue, or perhaps it was a deception of the sea and open sky. It was the Sea Ward Tower, the Mare Turim, the greatest lighthouse in all of the world. It was said that one could climb to the top and see over the sea to the lands of Gladium to the south, and even, on a purely clear day of summer, the shimmer of the ruined northern kingdom. It was also said that it was in the dead center of the city, so that any of the princes who would need to see over the city walls could travel from any point in the city and still find their way. The men and women parted to let Julius past. Despite only being little more than a boy, he was extraordinarily well known amongst his people and well loved. He was an eligible bachelor, and many of the women of nobility in the area all giggled at his presence or made efforts for him to catch their eyes. Julius ignored their efforts. He was married to his duty and to his land. It was a mistress that kept him busy and entertained, and more importantly, it didn't complain when he came home covered in blood. The others all proclaimed their joy or interest in Felthor and the Horseland royalty, but mostly Felthor. Turgon was enjoying the attention, blowing kisses to the women and attempting to show his muscles, a relatively futile task, as he was clad in full plate armor. When Gilorn entered the city, the crowd roared in celebration, but not for him, for the knight next to him. They all cried out his name and title, the Swan of the Coast and his steed, Serpent Eater. Tiberius and Richard were trotting behind them, and they were greeted with cheers, if uncertain ones. Only the elderly would remember them, and if they did, they probably wouldn't recognize Tiberius, as the last time he was there was when he had been in his adolescence. Richard would normally take offense at the fact that he was being ignored in comparison to the other lords, but all of his thoughts were on Tiberius, and, for once, he didn't notice the lack of enthusiasm. They continued down the streets, and finally they entered the Athenian Agora, the merchant corner for the nobility and the wealthy. It was different from the capital. It was quiet, but busy. Traders weren't calling out their wares, but were engaged in polite conversation with their customers. People turned to see them pass, but there were no cheers and cries. Many turned to whisper to themselves and politely bowed their heads to Julius, but not to the others, not even Feltor. "Welcome home, Your Grace," one woman smiled, placing a hand on his armored leg as he passed. "Good morning, my prince," a man smiled. "I have a daughter just come of age," another man called. "I would like to arrange a marriage of business." "I served with you at the coastal crossing," another called, more enthusiastic than the others. "I took a minor wound. Please accept me back into your company." Julius grunted with laughter once he saw who had just spoken. "Who is he?" Felthor asked. "He was squire to the Swan," Julius chuckled, turning in his saddle and giving the Swan an amused look. The knight simply rolled his eyes in irritation and shooed the squire away with a gauntleted fist. He seduced the healer who was attending his wounds in the Swan's bed and was caught. "I see," Felthor smiled, looking back at the squire's desperation. They continued through the square, walking past the walls that surrounded the base of the tower. In front of each gate and along the wall were the Knights of the Mare Turim, the order of the prince's personal guard. They were clad in a very similar garb of the Fountain Legionaries, only their helms were worked into finely embroidered hoods. They bore bright blue cloaks with golden birds in full flight on the back. Their shields were broad and equally blue with a smaller version of the seaward emblem on it. Their spears were as tall as each man and a half and made of gold, save for the small leather handle that each man held the shaft by. The spearheads were broad also, almost as wide as each warden's head. On top of the wall, there were the men at arms of the Mare Turim, clad in the same way, only they were without shields and spears and with longbows made of a pale wood. Julius raised a hand up to salute the men, who all nodded to him, but maintained their vigil. "Are these men of the capital?" Gilorn asked Turgon. "No," Turgon said. "These are Seaward's version of the Fountain Legion. Much friendlier and much better drinking partners." Gilorn looked up at the tower. "How high is it?" "High enough to destroy the entire city if it collapsed," Turgon chuckled. "It works more as a bell tower than a lighthouse. You can hear the bells all the way to the capital, apparently, though I never have." Gilorn nodded, and they continued. After what seemed to be a long time, they finally came to the House of Seaward, built atop the biggest hill. It was as grand as the citadel in the capital, and just as beautiful, with a great statue of the first Prince of Seaward in the center of the courtyard. It glowed in the sunlight, and it seemed to enhance the sea air. But, unlike the citadel of the capital, the lower walls were decorated with seashells and the twinkle of the glass sand of the kingdom's coast. Gilorn was impressed, just as much as he had been at the capital. He enjoyed the sea air. It had been alien to him at first, but now he couldn't get enough of it. They entered the courtyard, which was filled with men of Seaward dressed in the blue chainmail of the soldiers outside. Many of them came to receive the horses. A squire in cured leather with the white owl insignia on his breast came over to receive Julius. "Welcome home, my lord," he beamed up at his future prince. "Nemir, my friend," Julius smiled, and he dismounted. "How have you been?" "Exhausted and overworked, my lord," Nemir smiled. It was true in his face. His eyes were swollen and black with tiredness. "And may you live to complain about it bitterly as an old man," Julius smiled, clapping him on the shoulder. He had chosen Nemir to be his squire in Seaward for his honesty. Nemir had never shown any restraint in his words. When he was surrounded by liars and politicians, it was often hard to differentiate between them, and he knew he wanted an honest man about him. It was more than anyone like Namir would hope to gain, but he was not a warrior, so he wouldn't take him away from his family on his campaign on the coast. They both laughed. "Will you be staying long, sir?" Namir asked, stroking his steed's mane. "A week at most," Julius said. "The coast needs me out there. Are there any more knights interested in serving?" "Interested in serving?" Namir echoed his lord. "Yes, there are plenty. Ones wanting to put their lives on the line for honor and glory. No, my lord. I have managed to gain 10 more knights, less than half of what you asked me for. I am sorry." "Don't be, my friend," Julius smiled. "I'll take all I can get. One knight can make all the difference." "I'll say," Gilorn put in, as he dismounted himself. "You sound surprised," the swan said, speaking for the first time. He swung his leg effortlessly over his steed's head and slid to the ground as if his armor was not there. "Not surprised," Gilorn answered honestly. "Just impressed." The swan seemed to appreciate this and smiled. "Come," Julius said to Felthor, helping him off of his horse. He led the way up the stairs and into the hall. In the spirit of the wedding, there were several girls, no older than 10, gently laying flowers in their path. Turgon sneezed, his eyes watering. Richard laughed and slammed him on the back. The impact of it echoed around the stony entrance. They entered the wide open entrance hall. There was something about the walls and the way the light fell upon them. The water was with them. The walls were shimmering and seemed to be moving gently with the breeze. Falthor inhaled happily. "It's good to be back," he declared to the room. "How long has it been since you were last here?" Tiberius asked. "Years," Falthor sighed, saluting to a statue of Athena. "The last time I was here, I was graduating as an officer in the army of the king." Turgon smiled. "Within a month you were given your first command." He clapped him on the shoulder. "We won that battle with hardly any losses at all." "Orc raiders don't often offer much of a fight," Falthor grimaced. "And years later, you are now the best general in all the land," Richard nodded. "Aside from me, that is." "Let's keep that kind of talk to ourselves," Julius urged. They were waiting in the entrance to be admitted now. "Ignatius would make something of it, and I don't want to trample on my sister's day." "Good point," Falthor nodded. "Well, I hope we're allowed in soon," Turgon complained. "I hate spring and heavy armor. I swear I'm going to piss myself." "If I recall," Richard running his hand over his chin, "you did once." "Have you ever been made a legionary commander right after a battle?" Turgon demanded. "I swear I will never bend a knee in armor again." "Least you didn't piss on the steward himself," Tiberius chuckled. "Only his squire." They all laughed. It echoed around the hall. The laughter had died out by the time that a man in a blue tunic appeared. His Royal Grace Prince Alistair, second of his name. Alistair barely waited for him to finish. He rushed out and embraced Falthor with a silk arm. "My friends," he cried out, "it has been too long." "That it has," Falthor smiled. "More so for some of us," Tiberius smiled. Alistair suddenly noticed him. "Tiberius," he roared and pulled him close. Tiberius winced, and Alistair let him go. "Are you hurt, my friend?" "We were set upon by pirates," Richard explained, "but it will take more than that to take my son down." "More?" Alistair sighed. "These attacks are getting out of hand." "We may have some respite, father." Julius smiled at Turgon, who showed him the glass jar of the hair, which was wrapped in a leather binding. Alistair took it from him. "How have you accomplished this, my son?" It was a combined effort. Julius raised a hand to stop his father. He was an honorable man, and he was unwilling to take full credit where it wasn't due. I can imagine. My scouts reported the force that you faced. 6 ships. My bards have already composed many songs about the battle. I would hear the true story from you. Some details are less exciting than others, Tiberius muttered, clutching his side. Alistair's face fell. Did you lose many men? Unfortunately, Felthor nodded. Many of my men are in the care of Julius's healers at Pharos. My knights suffered many injuries, but they are fighting fit. My riders took few casualties, Richard said, successfully containing the details on how many he actually lost. The pirates did little against the cavalry. Is that how the fleet master fell? Alistair questioned. Falthor raised an eyebrow and turned to look at Gilorn. Alistair smiled at the ranger. He was dressed far greater than he was when they had last met. Kingslayer, he smiled and nodded at him. How are those sons coming along? Still nothing, my lord, Gilorn smiled awkwardly, but my wife is eager to have them. Alistair laughed. Come, my friends, I would have you all washed and readied for the feast tonight. Now you are speaking the language of men. Richard clapped his hands together. Alistair smiled. Come, he repeated. He examined Richard and Turgon. Something seems to be missing about you. A flagon of ale in each hand, Tiberius suggested weakly. Richard roared. He ran a massive hand over his clean chin. My face has never been so cold since the winter of my coronation. Alistair laughed and clapped him on the furred shoulder. It does not suit you, my friend. You need hair to show your fierceness, like this wolf you wear on your shoulder. It will grow back, Richard grumbled. Until then, I will hope my forebears will grant me the strength my hair kept for me. Let us hope, Alistair said, sympathetically. But strength is also kept up with drink and good food, Turgon pressed. Let us piss and wash, so we may eat. What do you plan on eating, my friend? Tiberius smirked. The food or the women? Both, Turgon said simply. Fortunately, I need not eat with my cock. They all laughed and allowed the servants to take them to their chambers to ready themselves for the feast.